Hey, welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Nightlick, and I'm making a video about MOQ, which means Minimum Order Quantity. I've made a few videos about this in the past, but of all the subjects on this channel about the toy industry and the life cycle of the North American salmon, the question I get the most is about MOQ and how it affects production of action figures and mostly adult action figures collectibles because, well, let's face it, it's much harder to hit an MOQ with adult collector figures because the production quota in the audience is much, much, much smaller compared to mainstream toys. Now, how do you know how many figures to make? Well, you have to make the MOQ. But how does this affect the choices that brand managers and companies make? Well, that's why we're doing the world's first ever FAQ on MOQ. Hey, stayed up all night working on that one. All right, so let's go into it. So obviously toys are made in factories, and when factories produce toys, they have to be modular. They have to basically set up an assembly line specific to the toy they're making. It's not just generic, like they're making any action figure or any doll or toy car or plush animal. Every single one is unique. And especially with action figures, let's say you have a case assortment of 8 figures, different characters in a case pack, in a wave. Well, each one of those individual figures not only has its own MOQ, it's not for an assortment, it's per style, but each one has to have the assembly line set up specific to that figure. And that's why MOQs come into place, because for all the bandwidth, for all the time it takes to set up a very specific assembly line for one individual figure, that's what costs a lot of time and money. Action figures are more difficult to make than other toys because they have more parts. There's more assembly involved. And the more assembly, the more time it takes, and the more specific the assembly line needs to be. Action figures are made of plastic, like most toys, and they're made in factories that produce plastic objects. But they don't always just produce action figures or toys. A lot of things can be made of plastic, like a lot of things. And if you own a factory that makes plastic things, well, you'd probably rather make the simplest thing possible and make the most number of those things as possible at once, because that means you set up your assembly line to make that object and you can just crank them out. So yes, if I was a factory owner, I would much rather just make plastic bowls and cups than a complicated action figure that has lots of moving parts and articulation and deco hits and etc., etc. When an action figure comes out of the machine, it comes like this on a tree, like the old stickfas used to, right? And you punch them out of the little plastic tree, and then different parts go in different bins and get assembled and either have stickers put on them or deco hits with paintbrushes. And, gosh, just thinking about stickfas for a minute, I miss those. Why did those go away? They were like such a cool, innovative toy. All right, well, either way, they do a good representation of what it's like to assemble a figure. So with the MOQ, it really takes teamwork to step up and make that MOQ, with multiple retailers, for the most part, needed to hit that quota. And that's why you see the same toy line at lots of different retailers, because they all participate in the minimum order quantity. So let's just say your minimum order quantity is 20,000. That's what the vendor sets because, again, time and money to set up his assembly line and train his workers to make that specific figure. He wants to know he's going to be able to make a minimum amount. All right, so Walmart has about 5,000 stores. Target has about 2,000. We'll round up. So again, if you have an action figure assortment of 8 characters, well, every one of those characters has an MOQ. So that 20,000 units times 8, if you will, in order to do the entire assortment. So let's say that with Walmart's 5,000 and Target's 2,000, that's 7,000 doors, they each take 2 case packs. So it's 16 figures in total, but 14,000 case packs. Well, they still need other retailers to participate. And that's where the smaller retailers, your online collector sites like Entertainment Earth, your specialty stores like GameStop, or Big Bad Toy Store, another online store, they all sort of chip in. They might take a smaller amount of the MOQ, but between the big boys and the little boys, or big girls and little girls, you can hit that together. Now, if you have a customized item, like something only available at one retailer, well, that means that retailer needs to take the entire MOQ themselves. And the bigger the retailer, the more ability they have to do this, which is why Walmart was able to have Masters of the Universe Origins for 6 months exclusively, because they could place the MOQ order because they have so many doors. With 5,000 doors or 6,000 doors, that's a lot of case packs that they can order that they can put on shelf. And that's why they have a lot of buying power and why you see a lot of Walmart exclusives, because an exclusive helps bring a customer in. Whether or not they're going to find that exclusive isn't as important as that customer walking out with something and making a purchase from any aisle. Another aspect of MOQ is production and cost. So besides the minimum amount a factory requires you to buy, you can obviously buy more than that. In fact, they would love you to buy more than that. They would like you to buy 10 times that. That's why they like making plastic cups and bowls, because they can produce those in the hundreds of thousands of units. And obviously, you're not going to buy more product than you can stock in your store. But if you're an online retailer or it's divided up amongst many, many different retailers, well, the higher the order, the lower a manufacturer is charged. So it's obviously advantageous for a toy maker, your Spin Master, your Jakks, your Mattel, your Hasbros, to basically get a volume discount by ordering way more than the MOQ and hitting like another tier, if you will. All right, so that's for your first order. When you're doing a replenishment order, or what a lot of collectors might call a second edition or a reissue, this is where you get into another problem or issue with the MOQ. So, all right, you've got to figure you've already hit the MOQ, you've shipped it to market, and people are saying they still want it. So let's say the blue circle here represents the total market that you could sell this figure to, all right? And the purple circle represents the MOQ that you have to order in order to go into production. And of course, the llama represents the struggle of the working class against the proletariat, which is what employs them in the factories in the first place. Now, we have to make sure we understand the role of the llama in the overall production cycle, but if you take the two circles and you overlap them, well, what's left of the blue represents the potential audience, because the overlapping area is the amount of the audience that already has the product. So you can see, because the circles no longer equal each other, your MOQ is now greater than the potential audience, because some people already have the toy. And that is why doing a second run is so difficult and can lead to problems, because you're producing more product for a total audience in which a large segment of the audience already has the figure. And that leads to the biggest problem, is too much of the same product on shelf, which leads to clearance sales. And that is the absolute worst thing, and that is what all toy buyers for the retailer and manufacturers are trying to avoid. It is honestly the epitome of failure, if you will, because if a product is put on clearance, well, it's going to devalue the brand. It's going to lose money for the retailer, lose money for the manufacturer, and for the IP owner who owns the brand. Well, they don't want to see their brand devalued, because then in the eyes of a customer and the public, well, they start to see the brand as no longer a winner. And the customers then stop buying that brand in total if you see a lot of it on clearance. So that is why MOQ and going into a reorder can clash. Nobody likes supporting a losing team, and that's kind of the whole story. So that's MOQ and action figures and how they relate. MOQ being the minimum amount a factory wants an order for in order to even turn on the machines, and why doing more than that in the first run is possible, but after that, a second run, MOQ kind of prevents that a lot of times. I hope this video clarified all the MOQ questions I've been getting. If you have more, leave them in the comments. I can always do a follow-up or answer you directly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.